We're back again, cause Trooper is your chef for lunch, and the chef is serving up crow. How would you like your crow? Would you like it medium rare, or would you like it well done? Look at that fucking slave cylinder. That's right, we're gonna do a tutorial on how to change a slave cylinder on your clutch. And if yours looks anything like mine, stand back, cause it's like a pipe bomb downtown Medellin during cartel Pablo Escobar's reign. Man, this thing's like a pipe bomb ready to go off. It is fucked up, and it's holding a lot of .3 in there. .3 has made it past the seal in the cylinder and has filled up the boot, which should look like that, and made it a cancerous tumor. Yeah, it's still hard, so it's not able to make it back past the seal. So it's just filling the boot, and because I've got my boot zap strap like that, it fills up like that. And I like it like that because I don't want it spilling all over the ground. I pay enough attention to my fluids that my first heads up is that I'm losing .3 somewhere. Where to go? It's got to go somewhere. It's a sealed system. So if we're losing .3, must be going to the clutch slave through that reservoir anyways. But the part about eating crow here is where I, in the last video, claimed that this slave cylinder off of Old Blue with the General Motors V6 and the MUA transmission was interchangeable. And look here. It is not. It is not. I was wrong. I'm eating fat ass plate of crow right now. And I'm going to fudge it anyways. I got one tang that's going to meet up, and I'm going to bolt it up for the day until my new slave arrives at the parts store tomorrow. So for all intents and purposes, we're going to make this a tutorial on how to install a clutch slave cylinder. Presuming that this is, we're just going to make believe here, this is a brand new clutch slave. And so you can see how I've prepped mine a little bit. Because it's an older clutch slave, I have taken it apart. I have cleaned underneath the boot. It was storing some .3, which is telling me that this seal may be on its way out. And I just need this for the day, so it's going to work just fine off of the one bolt instead of the two. They are not directly interchangeable, although they're so close I can fudge it for a day. I wouldn't want to go 4x4ing like that, because keep in mind, this is one of the pieces of equipment on your Trooper that can render you inoperable. If this clutch isn't, if this slave isn't operating properly, then your clutch isn't going to operate. And if your clutch isn't operating, then how are you going to drive anywhere, right? So it's good to take care of these things. They're not that expensive. You can get a remand unit for like 30, 40 bucks. And this is all we're going to need for tools to install this baby. Now that you've got your old one off, of course, well, we'll just pretend that we've got a starter. We're just going to pretend that we're starting from scratch here, because I'm going to try and put myself in your shoes. If you've never installed a clutch slave cylinder before, or if you've never done one on a Trooper, this is the easiest way to go. But this information applies to pretty much every vehicle, with the exception of some of the specific tools that I'm going to tell you that you're going to need. So really, you don't need a lot of tools for this. You're going to want some gloves to protect your hands, because of course it would be a really wise idea if you read all of the print on your .3 bottle before you start. You don't need a giant liter like this. .3 is so cheap that I'm getting it by the liter for less than 10 bucks with Lucas, but you can even go to the dollar store and grab this stuff for $1.25 a small bottle. This 350 ml bottle is definitely going to do your clutch slave just fine. So read the instructions. You do want to be aware of some of the facts. You know, don't drink it. Yeah. Don't wash your eyes out with it, and definitely don't use it as a skin lotion. You want to wear protective gloves and, of course, protective clothing, and keep out of the reach of children. The other thing to know is that .3 fluid is corrosive to paint, and it will act like paint stripper. So try not to drip any on your paint if you like it. And as far as tools are concerned, it'd be handy to have a nice clean bucket like this, some kind of a receptacle to catch your .3, and you're going to want something for bleeding, which is just a small 1/4 inch surgical tubing, or any kind of tubing like this. You're going to be able to find that at the Lordco part store. And I like a glass jar just because it lets me see through nice and clear. And this tubing is going to be used for bleeding the .3 through the new slave cylinder. I also like to throw a little white lithium grease on the end of my plunger and on the inside in the cup where this plunger rod actually meets the piston cup. And so for tools, what you're going to need is a 17 mil wrench. I like my little stubby because it gets in small places there. I just get an old wrench and cut it apart or break it. And you're going to want a ratchet with a 14 mil socket on it. And for bleeding, you're going to need a little tiny 8mm wrench for your bleeder nipple, right? And literally, that is it. Get yourself a couple of box end wrenches, 14, 17, and an 8, and then get yourself a ratchet with a 14 on there as well. And that's all you're going to need. And so once you get under there, one of the things you're going to notice is that the bolt that holds your hydraulic line to the clutch slave cylinder is one of the most important bolts. That's referred to as a banjo bolt. Where's one here? We got one right here. So here's our banjo bolt, and you can see it has a hole right through the middle, plus a couple holes on the sides. That allows the fluid to pass through the bolt, and that little copper gasket should be on both sides of the flange on the hose. So you're going to put this through the eye of the hose, and you want copper gaskets on both sides. That's going to be integral. So don't lose your copper gaskets, and try not to break your bolt or shear it. Hopefully somebody hasn't jammed it in the hole that hard. Of course, your assembly bolts, there's just 2 of those to bolt it to the transmission. So the first thing you're going to do is drain your reservoir, get all the fluid out, and then come on underneath with a nice little tray like I've got. Maybe you want to throw a shop diaper in there or whatever, and that's going to catch all the .3. Or maybe your slave cylinder will do it for you. But when you do break the line, you break the main line off of the side of the slave, you're going to get drips. It doesn't matter how clean you get that reservoir. You can bleed out the line through the bleeder valve. You're still going to get drips. So get yourself a tray or some rags and get that slave off of that spot. So here's the clutch fork, and your rod's going to be protruding through there. Once you pull those back 2 bolts, all you need to do is pull the slave cylinder a little bit towards the fork, and you can disengage it. You can see the mess it's made of the side of my transmission, just spewing everywhere. And so once you get that fitted up, what you're going to want to do is connect your line, make sure it's nice and tight and that there are no leaks, because this is a sealed system and you want it to be leak free. And so once that's done, then you can go ahead and refill your reservoir. Maybe you want to clean out the bottom of the res. I like to use syringes, as I mentioned, and Q-tips. And I just clean out the bottom of that res and get all the crap out of there before I go ahead and put the new fluid in. And then once the new fluid is in, then you can have a friend, hopefully you have an assistant, who will pump the pedal for you. And you're going to get under the truck, and you're going to hook up your wrench first, your box end wrench, in a position that you can open and close the valve fully. So you want to be able to close it tight and then be able to back it off a half a turn to open it. And once you've got your wrench on there in that position, then you go ahead and you take your hose and you just put your hose on the end of the bleeder valve, and hopefully you've got the right size of hose. You want it to sit on there snug, because what's going to happen is as you turn the wrench, that hose is going to stay still. It's not going to go anywhere. So it's going to turn with the valve, and it's going to keep the seal and not let any air bubbles past. That is the crucial part. Air inside the system is going to ruin your clutch action. It's going to give you a very spongy clutch, and you may find that your clutch travel is huge, and then you get a little action towards the bottom of the floor as you put the clutch pedal all the way down. So you really want to get a nice clean bleed going and make sure that no air bubbles come back up through the hose. And that is the reason why you have a little jar like this. You put all your old dirty .3 in the bottom, and the air bubbles go through, and they will bubble up through the bottom of the fluid, but air can't travel back up the line because you've got it submerged in the fluid. And of course, while you're doing this, after you do about 4 or 5 pumps, that reservoir is going to be almost drained. So you want to go up and replenish the .3 and keep that reservoir from draining all the way down, or else you have just defeated the purpose and sucked air into the lines again. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to basically bastardize this by going and throwing in this slave cylinder off of the V6 MUA, and that should work for the day. And I'll go ahead and I'll bleed it just like I told you. I don't have an assistant here at the moment because Goldie wouldn't go across town and pick him up. So I'm just going to do this by myself, and I'm going to open the valve. I'm going to go and pump the pedal, and it's just going to stay on the floor. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to close the valve. And then I'm going to go and lift the pedal up. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open the valve, and I'm going to go back over there and I'm going to push the pedal down. It's just going to stay on the floor. And so I'm just going to repeat that process quite a few times until I get all the air out, which is why it makes it super handy to have an assistant. An 8-year-old child could be your assistant on this. All you need is somebody to pump the pedal, hold it, and release it. So it's just a little call and response back and forth to your partner inside the truck. You open the valve. As you're opening it, you tell them to pump. They say holding when they're holding it on the floor, and you close the valve. Then you say release, and they release the pedal. And so this pumping and releasing, it's creating that vacuum action where it's sucking up new fluid from the reservoir, pushing it all the way down the line and into the slave cylinder. And after you see some air bubbles come out of there, keep going, because the slave cylinder holds a fair amount, you know, just, like a 1/4 liter, not that much, but you'd be surprised how much is in the air line, or in the hydraulic line, and how much is inside the reservoir or the actual slave cylinder itself. And so just keep pumping until you get a bunch of clear fluid coming out and no more air bubbles. You want it to just be clear fluid, no air bubbles, and then you should have a nice tight hydraulic system where the hydraulic fluid, the .3, has filled the whole system and evacuated all of the debris and all of the moisture and all of the air. And now it's just straight up new .3 fluid and you're good to go. Alright, I hope that helps, and yeah, I had to make this video and eat a little crow because I misinformed you. That's why I don't like working on the V6s too much. I'm pretty much a 4ZE1 guy, but do love those diesels. So, keep the rubber side down, troopers. Hopefully you're rolling more than I am today.